Chapter 750. His voice was deep and mellow. With a chuckle, he sounded even more unrestrained. 36 respected Elder Ming lifted his eyelids and took a glance at him. Rong Xiu was smiling. There was a hint of a smile in between his eyebrows, like the beginning of spring. However, that pair of deep eyes wasn't looking at the chessboard. They were silent with hidden ripples, as though he had sunk into deep thought. 36 respected Elder Ming was a little surprised. Rong Xiu was actually a very prideful person. In terms of chess skills, he could be said to be the best of the best. 36 respected Elder Ming felt that his standard was already not bad. However, in front of Rong Xiu, he couldn't even find out his bottom line. At the very least, among the people that he knew, no one could win against Rong Xiu in this aspect. No, it should be said that there was no one who could compete with him. Your Highness, do you mean that there is someone who can compete with you? Yes. Rong Xiu tilted his body slightly and propped up his elbows. No one knew what he thought of, but he suddenly laughed. I have lost quite a number of times. 36 respected Elder Ming was even more shocked. From what he said, he didn't lose because he went easy. He really lost. There is actually such a person in this world? It wasn't an easy thing to win against Rong Xiu. Of course there is. Rong Xiu's smile deepened. However, there was a tinge of extremely faint gentleness in his eyes. However, if we were to meet again now, my chances of winning would be higher. Knock knock. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door. Come in. Rong Xiu said indifferently. Yan Qing walked in and bowed to the two of them one after another before saying, Your Highness, 36 respected Elder Ming. The people from the Ming tribe are here. They want to see 36 respected Elder Ming. The Ming tribe was one of the tribes. It was also the clan that 36 respected Elder Ming came from. Because of 36 respected Elder Ming, the Ming tribe's status wasn't low. However, 36 respected Elder Ming's expression changed. He immediately became impatient. Why are they here again? Didn't I say that this old man is very busy and told them not to disturb this old man's business? Yan Qing lowered her head and said respectfully, Respected Elder, after you came out of seclusion this time, they sent people over. But at that time, you were busy discussing important matters with the other revered elders, so you didn't get to meet him. Now that they've heard that you've finally returned from your travels, they've specially rushed over. These bastards definitely didn't have any good intentions. It's fine if I don't meet him. Go back and tell them that this old man is in seclusion. I don't have time to see them recently. Every time they asked to see him, nothing good ever came out of it. Who knew why they were here this time? One had to know that not long ago, Rong Xiu had personally led an army to wipe out a division. Weren't they just looking for trouble by coming here at such a sensitive time? Missing. They were all gone. Yan Qing hesitated for a moment and said, Respected Elder, the news of you and His Highness playing chess for a few days has already spread outside. They also know about it. Otherwise, how would those people dare to block him here? 36 respected Elder Ming was extremely frustrated. Seeing his reaction, Yan Qing knew that it was best for her not to say anything else. But she had to say those words. In the end, she could only bite the bullet and say, They also said that they'll continue to wait for you here. Whenever you're done with your work, you can just meet them. 36 respected Elder Ming was so angry that he blew his beard and glared. In the end, he could only leave. From the looks of it, those people from the Ming division couldn't avoid being reprimanded again. A long time after he left, Rong Xiu sat up straight. He moved his wrist, and a crystal barrier appeared on the chessboard. Sunlight shone in from the window and shone on the crystal-clear crystal barrier. It was bright and moving. Then, there was the second one. Then, there was the third one. Rong Xiu took out a total of 6 crystal barriers and placed them in a row on the chessboard. He looked at the crystal barriers in front of him and laughed softly. I didn't expect it to be so fast. I've refined so many for nothing. He refined these crystal barriers according to different levels and wanted to give them to her gradually. But when he knew that she was planning to go to the Tianling dynasty, he was worried and gave her that one directly. What he didn't expect was that she would actually. Rong Xiu's thin lips curled up. Actually, this was within reason. After all, it was originally hers. It caused these glass worlds to have no place to be used. Yanqing stood at the side and quickly raised his eyes to take a look. He saw that his master had waved his sleeves and those crystal barriers were silently turned into dust. A light breeze blew, and those flying dust instantly flew up. Then it dissipated. She quickly lowered her head. Master had spent a lot of effort to refine these crystal barriers. Now they were all destroyed. Could it be that Miss Lu Yu's sighed, "Keep all these"? Rong Xiu said lightly. Yes. Yanqing hurriedly went forward. Looking at the faint marks left on the chessboard, she faintly felt her heart ache. These were all top-grade crystal barriers made with the best materials and personally refined by her master. If they were released, who knew how many people would be willing to go bankrupt just to get one? What a pity, what a pity. She had followed her master for so many years, but the number of times she saw her master personally refining yuan instruments was few and far between. And most of them were for Miss Lu Yu. Her actions were clean and nimble. She quickly cleaned up the chessboard and retreated. When she reached the door, Yanqing paused for a moment and asked again, "Your Highness, the people from the Ming division, don't you plan to meet them?" Those people from the Ming division had always been restless. No one knew why they were here this time. Although 36 respected Elder Ming was suppressing them, they were his clan after all. He was often restrained because of this. Rong Xiu laughed lazily and said casually, "They asked to meet 36 respected Elder Ming. After killing the chicken to warn the monkey, the other divisions were much more well-behaved. Even if they wanted to cause trouble, they had to reconsider their own abilities. Moreover, with 36 respected Elder Ming around, they couldn't cause trouble." Yanqing lowered his head and replied, "Yes, I will take my leave." After speaking, he respectfully retreated. After closing the door, the room fell into silence again. After a while, Rong Xiu looked in front of him. "Come out." A huge white figure flashed past. It was Xue Xue. She walked in front of Rong Xiu and lay on the ground. Only a pair of icy blue eyes stared at Rong Xiu. She looked very lovable and lovable, which was a rare sight. God knows how much she had been holding it in during this period of time. She missed her so much. Bah. Rong Xiu glanced at her indifferently. "You seem to think that this move will work on anyone?" Xue Xue's expression froze. The paw that was about to act coquettishly froze in midair. She didn't know how to continue. After being stunned for a while, she angrily retracted her paw. She angrily tilted her head to the side and let out a whimper. She wanted a warm and soft hug. Rong Xiu's gaze turned cold. "Dream on." "Xue Xue," Rong Xiu continued. "But I forgot to tell you. She has found little nine." Xue Xue suddenly raised her head and opened her eyes wide. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 751. On Rong Xiu's elegant face, there was a faint smile on his lips as if he was talking about a small matter that had nothing to do with him. However, Xue Xue was very clear that his expression, what he said, must be true. Many complicated emotions flashed through Xue Xue's eyes, and it let out a low whimper. It first got up and seemed to want to go out, but after taking 2 steps, it came back and lay down beside Rong Xiu's feet. Of course, it was happy. After all, its relationship with Little Nine had always been very deep. But it felt a little lost in its heart. Thinking that Little Nine could be with it every day after it went back, Xue Xue was very envious. Rong Xiu glanced at it from the corner of his eyes. Seeing that it was tired, he said casually, "Also, it has already broken through to become a divine beast." Xue Xue raised its head and lay down lazily again. So what if it was a divine beast? It was as if it wasn't. Rong Xiu smiled and finally added the last fatal sentence. "Its level is higher than yours." "Awoo!" Xue Xue was immediately provoked and looked at Rong Xiu in disbelief. Looking at Rong Xiu's silent smile, Xue Xue immediately understood that what he said was true. Xue Xue was very hurt. It turned around and jumped out of the window. "Awoo, cultivate. I can't lose." The soldiers in charge of guarding outside heard the sound and looked over in surprise. What happened to His Highness's magical beast? Xue Xue's figure flashed and disappeared from everyone's sight. Yan Qing, who had just walked outside, couldn't help but look up and shook her head sympathetically. It seemed that it was provoked by Master again. Mystic Forest. Chu Luiyue was wearing a pure gold sacred armor, blocking all the violent turbulence in the surroundings. Although they hadn't seen each other for a long time, this familiar feeling hadn't changed. Chu Luiyue was happy in his heart, but he still couldn't figure out the mystery of Rong Xiu and the colored glass world. In the end, Chu Luiyue gritted his teeth. The next time they meet, I must ask him face to face. All of a sudden, the surrounding light began to ripple like water. Chu Luiyue looked down and vaguely saw that the light seemed to be coming from something. It was just that she was still unable to see clearly due to the surrounding light. But the closer he got, the heavier the pressure became. Dumpling's movements gradually slowed down. Clearly, she was also being suppressed. Finally, one man and one beast landed. Chu Luiyue jumped down from Dumpling's back. With the protection of the pure gold sacred armor, this power and pressure would not pose any threat to her. Therefore, her movements were more agile. Dumpling had a few more wounds on her body, but fortunately, they were all superficial wounds and had already begun to heal. The bloodline power in its body was extremely strong, so its recovery ability naturally increased as well. Chu Luiyue felt more at ease as she surveyed her surroundings. This place seemed to be just a simple cave. The walls were chiseled, and the ground beneath his feet was hard and uneven, not black mud. In the middle, there was a protruding rock. The rock's shape was irregular, and only the top seemed to have been flattened by something, making it smooth and clean. There's a piece of crystal on top. That crystal was about the size of an adult man's 2 palms. It was about an inch thick and had an irregular shape. It was glowing with a rich and clear green color like jade. As the light emitted from above was surging upwards, the space at the bottom wasn't affected much. Chu Luiyue stared closely at that piece of crystal and vaguely saw a few broken runes on it. Could that be the broken seal that Qini mentioned previously? As Chu Luiyue was thinking, she saw the runes on it floating gently. The light on the crystal also swayed as gently as water ripples. Chu Luiyue took a step forward. Suddenly, she felt that the origin power in her body seemed to have become restless. Chu Luiyue's heart skipped a beat. She then realized that this crystal was actually absorbing the surrounding energy. The terrifying suction force that she felt just now was coming from above. She clenched her teeth and continued walking forward. Dumpling originally wanted to stop her, but after some thought, she didn't say anything and just followed closely behind her. At the same time, she handed something over. Chu Luiyue turned around and realized that it was the black shield that she took from Shangguan Wan previously. I shouldn't say that, because this black shield was hers to begin with. Chu Luiyue took the black shield, and a hint of nostalgia flashed across her face. This black shield actually had a long history. Because of this, she found it together with the pure gold armor back then. At first, Chu Luiyue thought that the armor and shield were a pair, but she later realized that wasn't the case. The pure gold armor quickly recognized its owner, and that was how she learned its name. However, she tried many methods to awaken this black shield, but she still couldn't. Thus, she didn't even know its name until now. However, even if she didn't inject her force and didn't recognize its owner, the defense of this black shield was still extremely strong. Therefore, Chu Luiyue had always carried it with her and would only use it when she encountered a dangerous battle. The world only knew that the pure gold armor was a rare treasure, and the Empress relied on this armor to win every battle. But they didn't know that at least half of the credit belonged to this black shield. Actually, in Chu Luiyue's heart, she had always thought that the level of this black shield might be stronger than the pure gold armor. Because until she broke through to the 8th rank warrior, she was still unable to move this black shield. Without any assistance, the power of this thing was still not inferior to the pure gold armor. If it really recognized its owner, she wondered how powerful it would be. Shangguan Wan only thought that this black shield was useful and didn't take it to heart. Previously, when the black shield was snatched away, although she was furious, It was only because her item was snatched away and not because she felt that she had lost a treasure. If she knew the true power of this black shield in the future, she would probably regret it so much that her intestines would turn green. Chu Luiwei placed the black shield in front of her and walked forward. With this layer of protection, that terrifying suction force was indeed blocked outside. Chu Luiwei gradually got closer and stopped when she was 5 steps away from the crystal. She then looked at it intently. From here, she could basically see the appearance of the crystal stone clearly. Suddenly, Chu Luiwei's eyes focused. In the middle of the crystal stone, there was a shuttle-like thing the size of a fingernail. Chu Luiwei frowned with uncertainty. It seemed to be a seed? It's actually the origin slaughtering sacred seed? A voice filled with shock sounded. Chu Luiwei turned her head. Taizu, you recognize this thing? What is the origin slaughtering sacred seed? She had never heard of it before. Taizu stared at the crystal stone with disbelief on his face. After a while, he said, I do recognize it. Many years ago, I saw it once, but at that time, he had seen it in the hands of a great expert. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 752. Logically speaking, it was absolutely impossible for this thing to appear here. This was because the power of space here could not withstand the pressure of the 2-Tian baby at all. He had once seen with his own eyes that the Almighty had used a heaven-wrecking holy seed to easily destroy a dynasty. That was right. It was a dynasty. An existence like the Tianling dynasty. It was not hard to imagine how terrifying this thing was. It was the first time that Chu Luiwei had seen Taizu with such an expression on his face. In fact, one could see some clues from the name. 2-Tian baby. What kind of thing dared to have such a presumptuous name? Chu Luiwei had read countless books, and she had even read many unique ancient books. However, she had never heard of this name before. Looking at Taizu's appearance, it must be very powerful. This thing can't be explained in a sentence or two. You only need to know that this thing is extremely powerful and also extremely dangerous. Taizu looked at Chu Luiwei with a grave expression. We can't stay here. We must leave as soon as possible. Chu Luiwei frowned slightly and looked up. How could they get out? Only then did Taizu realize that Chu Luiwei had been dragged down by this thing. It would be as difficult as ascending to the heavens if they wanted to go back. He sighed deeply and frowned. Looking at this thing now, it seemed to be very calm. It should be because it was trapped by the crystal outside. But who knew when it would come out? When that time came, even he would not be able to save Chu Luiwei. Seeing Taizu's worried look, Chu Luiwei was not particularly worried. She tried to persuade Taizu, don't worry too much. Maybe we can find a way to leave soon. Taizu sighed in his heart. This girl still did not know how terrifying the power of the 2-Tian baby was. If this was an ordinary situation, why would he be so worried? He did not know who had placed the seal on it. Now that the seal had broken, he was afraid that. Chu Luiwei took a few steps back and sat cross-legged on the flat ground at the edge of the cliff. She held the black shield in front of her. Taizu looked at her in confusion. Luyu, what are you doing? Chu Luiwei put her hands on her knees and smiled. Thinking won't solve any problems. It's better to take advantage of this time to cultivate. This place may be dangerous, but the energy of heaven and earth is very rich. The speed of cultivation is several times faster than in the outside. Taizu was dumbfounded. This was a matter of life and death. Why was this girl still thinking about these things? In such a short period of time, if he were to cultivate desperately, how much could he improve? He really didn't know whether to say that she was fearless because she didn't know, or that she had gone crazy from cultivating. Shangguan Jing held his forehead when he saw Chu Luiwei slowly close her eyes and really plan to start cultivating. Taizu. He really couldn't do anything to this girl. He looked back at the 2-Tian baby and walked over to Chu Luiwei, resigned to his fate. If something really happened, the girl would be safer with him in front of her. Chu Luiwei opened her eyes and looked at the translucent figure standing in front of her. Her eyes welled up with tears, and a warm current seemed to surge in her heart. Taizu, thank you. She said word by word seriously. Taizu turned around and looked at her with a deep gaze. Chu Luiwei was confused by this gaze. She unconsciously stopped her back and asked tentatively, "What do you mean?" Taizu? Taizu smiled bitterly, shook his head, and sighed, but his expression was extremely gentle. "Isn't it natural for me to protect my juniors?" Chu Luiwei was stunned on the spot. Her mind went blank. Taizu knew? When did he know? She had never said. Seeing Chu Luiwei's expression, the last trace of doubt in Taizu's heart was completely eliminated. As expected, Chu Luiwei was really his bloodline. There seemed to be waves surging in the depths of his eyes as countless complicated emotions surged within. He had so many questions to ask her, but when they reached the tip of his tongue, he couldn't say anything. After a while, Chu Luiwei finally reacted and said hesitantly, "Taizu, what do you mean by that, Ling Xiaopom?" Seeing that Chu Luiwei still refused to admit it, Taizu smiled and shook his head. "Ling Xiaopom can't be practiced by anyone who isn't a member of the Tianling dynasty's royal family. You, on the other hand, performed the third level, didn't you?" Chu Luiwei suddenly understood. So that was it. At that time, she had only thought that Shangguan hadn't seen the third level of Ling Xiaopom, so she had simply made a move. However, she had forgotten that this palm technique was created by Taizu. Even if she had only sketched an outline and hadn't really performed it, Taizu's eyesight was extraordinary. From then on, the great ancestor should have guessed something, right? Being suddenly exposed like this, Chu Luiwei felt a little embarrassed for a moment. Thinking of the various disguises she had used to deceive Taizu, she didn't know how to face it. Taizu just looked at her quietly, his eyes kind. After a while, Chu Luiwei stood up. She looked deeply at Taizu, the corners of her eyes slightly red. Then, she lifted the hem of her clothes, knelt down, and bowed her head to kowtow. Unfilial descendant Shangguan Yu greets Taizu. Chu Luiwei was trapped, and the crowd outside was about to go crazy from anxiety. Lei Laosi, Mu Hongyu, and the rest searched seriously, and they had to confirm every face over and over again, afraid that they would miss something. However, even after they had checked all the people who were chased out, they still didn't find any traces of Chu Luiwei. Lei Laosi was almost in despair as he stared at the rapidly withering mother tree in a daze. Could it be that Her Highness really, Laosi, come back? Qin Yi suddenly spoke. Lei Laosi turned around in a daze. Qin Yi shook his head silently. Since we've already searched one round and can't find Her Highness, then she must be trapped down there. Big brother, Lei Laosi wasn't willing to move. We didn't protect Her Highness well in the past, and I didn't expect it to be the same this time. I only hate that I can't take Her Highness's place to suffer. If I could use my life to exchange for Her Highness's life, I definitely wouldn't have any objections. Qin Yi knew that once he became stubborn, even 9 bulls couldn't pull him back. Thus, he decided not to persuade him and just looked at Chang Wanzhou at the side. "Are you sure?" Chang Wanzhou nodded. "I can confirm that she's still alive. It's just that I can't find her location in such a short period of time. There seems to be an extremely strong force under this mystic forest that isolates everything." Qin Yi felt more at ease. "My instincts also feel that Her Highness is fine, but if this drags on, it'll be hard to say. We must save her, but these people here are really troublesome." He looked at Shangguan. At this moment, Shangguan was standing rooted to the ground in a daze, and her eyes were filled with shock. What happened just now? The pure gold armor actually turned into powder and completely disappeared. It was clearly fine just now. How did this happen? Quite a few people around saw this scene, and at this moment, they all quietened down and had different expressions. Amidst the embarrassing silence, a questioning voice that seemed to be suppressing something was clearly heard. Did the third princess break Her Highness pure gold sacred armor? Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 753. This sentence was very cold and harsh, like a sharp thorn that directly pierced through the dead silence. Shang Guanwan looked in the direction of the voice and frowned. The person who spoke was a black cavalry soldier wearing armor. His face and body were covered in blood, and he was currently staring at her. His gaze was as cold as a knife, dense with anger that was about to burst out. Shang Guanwan's expression instantly turned cold. Who do you think you are? How dare you question this princess like this? Who gave a mere black cavalry soldier the courage to speak to her with such a tone and expression? Even an important official in the imperial court wouldn't dare to not give her face like this. That soldier straightened his neck and continued speaking. This lowly one is a black cavalry lieutenant, Tianzhuangzhuang. This lowly one isn't questioning your highness, it's just a question. The pure gold armor was the crown princess's personal armor when she was alive, and it hasn't been broken after hundreds of battles. Now that it's being used by the third princess, it hasn't been through any battles, yet it's been directly destroyed. Third princess, don't you intend to explain? Shang Guanwan was so angry that she laughed. The crown princess? Shang Guanyu couldn't be more dead, and now the entire Tianling dynasty was under her, Shang Guanwan's control. She even killed Shang Guanyu, so what if she used her armor? Not to mention a mere black cavalry lieutenant, even in the entire Tianling dynasty, no one had the right to question her like this. It's just a piece of armor, why should this princess give you an explanation? She looked deeply at Tianzhuangzhuang, then spoke lightly to Mu Qinghe. Vice Admiral Mu, this is the soldier you're leading? Isn't this too unruly? She didn't even need to personally deal with this kind of reckless person. With just a word, Mu Qinghe would have to deal with him. However, the expected scene didn't happen. Mu Qinghe's face was expressionless, but her chin was somewhat tense, as if covered with a layer of frost. This is indeed an item that Empress Concubine treasured greatly when she was alive. The third princess might not know this, but to the soldiers of the Black Cavalry, this pure gold sacred armor had an extraordinary meaning. Now that it has been destroyed, the last general knows that you didn't do it on purpose, but please give everyone an explanation. Shang Guanwan was shocked. Mu Qinghe? What is the meaning of this? Did he want her to explain or apologize? Just for a pure gold armor? Mu Qinghe met her gaze, her eyes firm and persistent. It was obvious that he wasn't going to let the matter rest. Shang Guanwan trembled with anger. The pure gold sacred armor suddenly shattered. She also didn't know what was going on. She didn't even have time to feel sorry for herself, yet she had to explain herself to these people? What a joke! She looked at Jianghu angrily. Mu Qinghe was his woman. However, Jianghu seemed to be in a daze. No one knew what he was thinking. Shang Guanwan called him twice before he came back to his senses. However, there was still a hint of disappointment and worry in his eyes. Shang Guanwan rarely saw him like this, and she felt uneasy. But the most important thing now was still the pure gold sacred armor. After Jianghu reacted, he frowned and looked at Shang Guanwan. What kind of powerful treasure was the pure gold sacred armor? It had always been fine. Why did it suddenly shatter when Shang Guanwan wore it? Shang Guanwan was infuriated by his glare. However, considering that there were still many people watching, she could only swallow her anger. Jianghu also cared about each other's face and didn't say anything in front of Mu Qinghe. The third princess has just experienced a life-and-death situation and is still in shock. Although the pure gold sacred armor is important, it's not as important as her. You are the Black Cavalry. You know best what your first priority is. Don't forget your identity. These words were very serious. If it was in the past, Mu Qinghe would definitely not continue to say anything. But it was different this time. Mu Qinghe's expression didn't change as she said calmly, "Eldest young master, it's precisely because we are all Black Cavalry that we are very insistent on this matter. Even if I don't ask, they will ask until they get a reasonable explanation." Jianghu frowned and looked at the Black Cavalry around him. Sure enough, those soldiers had already gathered around and were looking over here. Moreover, their expressions were stubborn, exactly the same as Tianzhuangzhuang, who asked first. It was as if they wouldn't leave if Shang Guanwan didn't explain. The atmosphere was heavy. There was dead silence. At this point, Shangguan finally realized that something was amiss, and a hint of panic flashed across her eyes. What are you planning to do? Are you trying to rebel? Mu Qinghe said, the third princess is too serious. Third princess, you're being too serious. They just want an explanation from you. Explanation? What explanation do they need? Ever since Shangguan took over power, she had never been so aggrieved. Previously, these people had clearly obeyed her every word. But just because she had destroyed a pure gold armor, they actually turned their backs on her. Extremely arrogant and presumptuous. When Qin Yi saw this scene from afar, a cold smile appeared on his lips. How would Shangguan, who had grown up in Xiling City with a silver spoon in her mouth, understand that military power had always been independent of imperial power? Back then, how many black cavalry did Her Highness risk her life to save? On the surface, this military power seemed to belong to Mu Qinghe. But in reality, it belonged to Her Highness. It was fine if they didn't mention it normally, but now that Shangguan destroyed the pure gold sacred armor, it was no different from stepping on everyone's bottom line. They naturally wouldn't let her off so easily. Shangguan clenched her fists tightly and almost crushed her teeth. Shangguan Yu is dead, but I'm still restricted by her everywhere. She angrily said, it's just a piece of scrap metal. So what if it's gone? What's there to explain? The moment she said that, murderous intent rose from all directions. Third princess, please be careful with your words. Digression. Tomorrow at 12 a.m. mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from AI Web. Her Highness the Empress Concubine has worn the pure gold sacred armor so many times without any problems. The third princess only wore it once and it was directly damaged? That's right. Although Her Highness the Empress Concubine is no longer around, this is her relic after all. The third princess used it just like that. It's fine if she used it properly, but now that the pure gold sacred armor is completely damaged and doesn't leave any traces, the third princess doesn't feel guilty at all. Instead, she's so self-righteous. Although everyone had lowered their voices, the people nearby could hear them. This was especially so for Shangguan, who heard it clearly. Wasn't this equivalent to criticizing her in front of her? These black cavalry soldiers were too much. Shangguan took a deep breath and suppressed the anger in her heart with great difficulty. She could already tell that these black cavalry soldiers respected Shangguan very much. She couldn't do anything to them in a short period of time. The pure gold sacred armor was already gone. She couldn't lose more because of this. If she really angered these people, who knew what they would do? Her tone finally softened. I naturally know that the pure gold sacred armor is an extremely precious item to my elder sister. It's also because of this that I took it out again. If my elder sister's spirit is in heaven, she definitely wouldn't want to see the pure gold sacred armor placed on a shelf, right? This consort personally believes that an item like this should only be used to its fullest potential. I just didn't expect such a thing to happen this time. Just now, I also went through a few life and death situations, so I was a little emotional for a moment. What I said just now wasn't intentional. This consort already feels extremely remorseful for breaking eldest sister's things. Shangguan's voice even sounded a little choked as she spoke. Not to mention other things, her acting skills were still very good. Otherwise, she wouldn't have been able to reach her current position. Tianzhuang turned his face away with a hint of disdain in his eyes. Only a brainless person would believe Shangguan's explanation. If she hadn't been forced to this extent, she would probably still be as arrogant as before. Like Tianzhuang, most of the black cavalry soldiers disdained Shangguan's words. Jianghu came out to smooth things over. Alright, let's end this matter here for now. Right now, it's more important to leave this mystic forest first. Half of the leaves on that mother tree had already withered and fallen. It wouldn't be long before it completely withered. When those Yeshan withered, the entire mystic forest was almost turned upside down. Who knew what the consequences would be if something happened to this mother tree? Mu Qinghe also glanced at the mother tree and nodded gently. Soldiers of the Black Cavalry, listen up. Gather. Mu Qinghe gave the order and immediately received everyone's response. All the soldiers ran one after another and lined up neatly in a short while. There were also people who were seriously injured who were taken care of by the side. On the battlefield, they had encountered situations that were several times more tragic than this. It was naturally not a problem to deal with such a situation. Mu Qinghe glanced around. All captains, report the number of survivors. Tian Zhuangzhuang straightened his back. Reporting, first squad of the Black Cavalry, 63 survivors. When they arrived, there were a total of 10 squads. Each squad had 100 soldiers and was led by a captain. Out of 100 people, 63 survived. The casualties could be said to be heavy. The other captains also reported the situation of their squads. Among them, 4 captains of the squads died. With every sentence, Mu Qinghe's face turned colder. Although he had roughly guessed this number before, when he heard the confirmation, his heart still wavered. With every sentence, the surrounding atmosphere became more and more solemn. By the time the last person finished speaking, the entire forest had fallen silent. Before they came, the Black Cavalry had 1,000 people. Now, only 617 of them were left. Nearly 400 of them were rescued by Chu Luiyue and the others. Without them, the consequences would be even more unimaginable. They had only entered the mystic forest once, and almost half of them had died. The situation of the other sects was not much better. Basically, 1/3 of them had died. At this moment, Shangguanwan said, "We can't stay here anymore. Let's go to the Mirror Lake." Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from the Love Network. Chapter 755. Once she said that, she immediately attracted all kinds of gazes. Even Jiang Yuqing frowned and looked at her disapprovingly. We're all heavily injured now. The most important thing is to leave as soon as possible. I'm afraid it's not appropriate to go to Mirror Lake now, right? Shangguanwan pressed her lips together and knitted her brows. But we haven't found any of the herbs we wanted for father. If I return to Xiling empty-handed like this, I don't know how the world will criticize and ridicule me. Besides, my Yuan meridian hasn't fully recovered yet. Once I return to Xiling, it won't be as easy as here. I'm just one step away. I'm definitely not willing to give up just like that. Also, even though an accident happened in the Mystic Forest, it might not be the same in Mirror Lake. The Huang Swamp is vast and boundless. If we only come to the Mystic Forest once and leave without finding anything, then what's the point of this trip? Jiang Yuqing was silent for a moment. Although he knew that whatever Shangguanwan said and did now was for herself, what she said was not without reason. Back then, everyone in Xiling knew that they came in such a grandiose manner. If they returned just like that, it would indeed be hard to say. After thinking for a long time, he could only agree. Okay, then we'll go to Mirror Lake next. However, if we encounter such danger again, we must immediately leave the Huang Swamp without hesitation. Shangguanwan naturally agreed. Since the 2 people with the highest statuses had decided on this matter, the rest had to comply even if they didn't want to. At this point, the Mystic Forest's periphery had stopped collapsing. Even though the ground was uneven, it could still allow everyone to leave successfully. After the crowd, Mu Hongyu and the rest didn't move as they stood beside Qin Yi with worried expressions. "Big brother Qin, can you find where Lu Yu is now?" Qin Yi pondered for a moment and shook his head lightly. "There's a force below blocking everything outside, so I can't investigate. However, I can confirm that the force came from the mother tree. So, it definitely has something to do with the Mystic Forest becoming like this." Yi Ranran clasped his hands and asked worriedly, "Then, could Lu Yu be under the mother tree? If we go down, will we be able to find her?" Qin Yi sighed softly. If only things were that simple. In fact, he was already certain that Chu Luiyue was indeed under the mother tree. The powerful energy that had spread out should have been released after the seal had been broken. Since Chang Wanzhou was certain that Chu Luiyue was still alive, she was most likely there. However, he and Lei Laosi had stayed here for close to 2 years, and they didn't know what exactly was down there. Judging from the current situation, they wouldn't be able to break in any time soon, let alone find out. Lu Yu is still alive. A voice filled with shock and surprise was heard. They turned around. Senior brother Zhu Hong? Mu Hongyu quickly glanced at Zhu Hong. His injuries were basically fine, and there were still a few people standing behind him. They were all Dragon Teeth Mountain disciples. You didn't follow them? Asked Mu Hongyu strangely. Zhu Hong shook his head. Lu Yu saved our lives. How can we just leave like that? He previously thought that Chu Luiyue was already dead, so he felt terrible for a long time. Seeing that Mu Hongyu and the rest were still standing there, he was curious and came over. In the end, he happened to hear them discussing how to find Chu Luiyue. Not mentioning other things, Qin Yi and Lei Laosi were very strong. If they believed that Chu Luiyue was still alive, then it shouldn't be wrong. He originally didn't want to believe that Chu Luiyue was dead. Now that he heard that there was still hope, he naturally wanted to search for her. Then, Zhu Hong looked at Qin Yi and bowed solemnly. He could tell that Qin Yi was the strongest among them and was also the backbone of the group. The most important thing was that Qin Yi was willing to help find Chu Luiyue. Young Master Qin, we know that we're weak and injured, so we can't help much. However, Lu Yu did us a huge favor, and we'll definitely repay him. If you have any requests, just let us know. As long as we can help even a little, we'll be happy. Qin Yi glanced at him, and his gaze became gentler, but he still shook his head. I understand your intentions, but this place is really dangerous. But this place is indeed dangerous. You can't stay here. The faces of Zhu Hong and the others were filled with disappointment. The hidden force below is extremely scary. Once it explodes, even fourth brother and I might not be able to protect you. If something really happens, wouldn't it be a waste of her efforts to save you? Qin Yi's tone was very calm, but every word he said was like a stone that heavily smashed into everyone's hearts. Zhu Hong laughed bitterly. He understood that Qin Yi's words were very tactful. All of them were more or less injured. I'm not afraid of not being able to help. I'm just afraid that I'll become a burden instead. After thinking for a while, Zhu Hong sighed. Young Master Qin is right. I'll leave the matter of finding Lu Yu to you. Qin Yi nodded lightly. These few people from Dragon Teeth Mountain have good characters and are more sensible. It can be seen that Jian Shai taught them well. On the other hand, Song Qingyan hurriedly left with Shangguan Wan and the rest when he heard that this place was dangerous. Zhu Hong looked at Mu Hongyu. Originally, he wanted to persuade Mu Hongyu to leave with them, but he thought that she was close friends with Chu Luiyue and definitely wouldn't be willing to leave. Thus, he didn't say that. Hongyu, you guys be careful. Mu Hongyu isn't injured and has a faint yuan body. She might really be able to help Qin Yi and the rest. Mu Hongyu nodded. Senior brothers and senior sisters, be careful. Very quickly, Zhu Hong and the rest also left with the group. Only Qin Yi and the rest were left on the spot. The mother tree was still rapidly withering. After walking for some distance, Shangguan Wan looked back and vaguely saw that there were still a few people standing there without moving. She narrowed her eyes. Qin Yi and Lei Laosi aren't our people, so it's normal for them not to leave with us. However, why are the others still waiting there? Jianghu followed her line of sight and looked back, frowning slightly. What are they doing there? Shangguan Wan sneered in her heart. Are they still waiting for Chu Luiyue to come back from the dead? Digression, I'm about to turn into a raisin, make up at 6 p.m. Also, mobile users with today's update, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from LoveWeb. Chapter 756. They probably don't want to believe the truth and want to continue searching for Chu Luiyue's traces. Shangguan Wan said nonchalantly, but her eyes were filled with disdain and mockery. Jiang Yuqing saw her expression, and a tinge of impatience and disgust rose in his heart. His expression also became much colder as he looked at Mu Qinghe. They came together after all. How can we leave them behind alone? Go and call them back. Mu Qinghe's brows moved slightly, and a tinge of surprise flashed across her eyes. Jiang Yuqing doesn't seem to have a good relationship with Chongshu Pavilion. Why is he concerned about the lives of our disciples at this time? This really doesn't match his usual style of doing things. As she was too shocked, Mu Qinghe paused for a moment before nodding. The last general will. Why do you care about them? Sheng Guanwan suddenly spoke and interrupted Mu Qinghe. As if realizing that her words were a little inappropriate, her expression changed slightly as she coughed and added a few more sentences. Oh, what I mean is that their hearts and minds are filled with finding Chu Luiyue. It's useless for anyone to persuade them. They might even end up being blamed in the end. Even though they came together, this is what they want to do. Outsiders have no right to interfere, right? She looked at Jiang Yuqing meaningfully and seemingly smiled. Yuqing, I know you have good intentions, but sometimes, good intentions often lead to bad things. Anyway, with Qin Yi and Lei Laosi around, nothing will happen to them. They might even want to follow Qin Yi and Lei Laosi. But in this Dehuang swamp, it's really dangerous for a few people to be alone. Jiang Yuqing knitted his brows. Why don't we send a portion of the Black Cavalry and go together with them? Together with what? Sheng Guanwan cut him off as if she was joking. Yuqing, don't tell me you want to find Chu Luiyue too? We know you. We know you're doing this for their own good. But in the eyes of those who don't know what's going on, that might not necessarily be the case. You don't want to be misunderstood, do you? The fire in Jiang Yuqing's chest arched, and he finally suppressed it with great difficulty. I got it. What you said makes sense. Just let them be. Only then did Sheng Guanwan stop and lower her eyes. However, the bottom of her heart was not so calm. She had deliberately mentioned Chu Luiyue just now to test him. She could clearly see the panic in Jiang Yuqing's eyes for a moment. Why was he panicking? Sheng Guanwan walked forward step by step, but her body was tense and her hands were tightly clenched. Her face was covered with a veil, and there were scars on her face, so it was not easy for others to see her expression. However, the aura around her was extremely cold. She had long suspected that Jiang Yuqing had feelings for Chu Luiyue, and now it seemed that it was true. If it were someone else, he would definitely not say a word. Was it just because of the somewhat similar eyebrows? Sheng Guanwan was unconvinced and unwilling to accept it. Although the two of them had killed Sheng Guanyu together, she knew that many years ago, Jiang Yuqing did indeed like Sheng Haiyu. However, for some reason, it seemed that his attitude toward Sheng Haiyu changed overnight. Until now, she still did not know why. She had never asked. Jiang Yuqing also liked her, but this kind of like was different from the kind of like he used to like Sheng Haiyu. She knew that once she asked, many things would be different. She was not that stupid. Besides, Sheng Haiyu was dead after all. What was the point of arguing with a dead person? However, this time, Jiang Yuqing felt that familiar uneasiness toward Chu Luiyue. Sheng Guanwan glanced at Jiang Yuqing. He fell into deep thought again. No one knew what he was thinking. Along the way, he had lost count of how many times he had been like this. The people who could make him feel this way were Sheng Haiyu and Chu Luiyue. Sheng Guanwan wanted to flare up, but she suppressed it. In the end, both of them were dead. Just like that, Sheng Guanwan secretly comforted herself for a long time before she finally calmed down. However, Jiang Yuqing, who was next to her, did not notice it at all. Or perhaps he noticed it, but he was too lazy to care. The two of them walked forward together, but they had different thoughts and did not speak. A few hours later, they finally walked out of the mystic forest and arrived at the border of Mirror Lake. Mirror Lake is up ahead, Mu Qinghe said in a low voice. Sheng Guanwan perked up and looked forward. At this time, the sun was setting in the west. At the border where the water met the sky, large patches of clouds floated. Light pierced through the clouds and dyed half the sky a brilliant gold. Below, Mirror Lake was boundless, reflecting the scenery in the sky. At first glance, it looked like a huge mirror on the ground. Everyone quieted down. Such a scene could be considered as a paradise on Earth. I didn't expect the scenery of Mirror Lake to be so beautiful. Yeah. Just one look and I'm mesmerized. This is the most beautiful place I've seen in my life. It looks calm and peaceful. It doesn't seem as scary as the rumors say. Many disciples walked forward and looked at the scenery with intoxicated expressions. They praised it one after another. Compared to the purgatory-like mystic forest, this place was many times better. However, while they were immersed in the moving scenery of Mirror Lake, many of the Black Cavalry members looked tense. He seemed to be very nervous. Even Mu Qinghe was no exception. Your Highness, First Young Master, Mirror Lake looks peaceful, but it's actually as dangerous as the mystic forest. It's better to be careful. He originally wanted to say that Mirror Lake was more dangerous than the mystic forest, but after considering what happened in the mystic forest, he decided to put the two on the same level. Of the 3 places in Dahuang Swamp, this is the place with the highest number of deaths. Mu Qinghe's words made everyone quiet down. Many of the sect disciples who had previously yearned for the Mirror Lake were stunned when they heard this. They looked at each other in dismay. Shang Wanwan was also surprised. Really? But Mirror Lake doesn't look like anything. Wait, what's that? Everyone followed her line of sight. In the middle of Mirror Lake, there was a flower breaking out of the water and rising slowly. It was a palm-sized flower with a total of 5 petals that were pink and white in color. Under the afterglow of the setting sun, it looked translucent. It looked magnificent and beautiful. When the breeze blew, it swayed gently. Elder Qiushi suddenly widened his eyes in shock. Isn't that the dancing lotus? Shang Wanwan was pleasantly surprised. Elder Qiushi, are you sure that's the dancing lotus? It was rumored to be a top-grade medicinal herb that could revive the dead and regrow flesh and bones, the dancing lotus. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 757. I've only seen it in ancient books, but looking at its appearance, it should be close to the mark. Elder Qiushi was also very excited, and his face flushed. Even in the entire Tianling dynasty, there might not be such a rare treasure. Rumor has it that the dancing lotus takes 100 years to germinate, 100 years to grow branches, and 300 years to bloom. However, its flowering period was only a short 5 years. If no one plucked it within 5 years, the dancing lotus flower would fall and bear fruit again, entering another 500-year cycle. Currently, this dancing lotus flower was in its flowering period. Elder Qiushi's eyes lit up. Your Highness, we've really come to the right place this time. As long as we have this dancing lotus, His Majesty's health will definitely improve. Although the few herbs that they planned to find previously were also considered treasures, compared to this dancing lotus, they were many levels apart. Shang Wanwan was also very happy. This time, she came to Dahuang Swamp in the name of finding herbs for her father. The only mythical beast had already died with Chu Luiyue. It would probably be difficult to meet another one. However, as long as they had this dancing lotus, they didn't need to find any other herbs. It would definitely be perfect to bring it back. It must be the 3rd princess's filial piety that allowed us to encounter this dancing lotus. Elder Qiushi sighed and didn't forget to flatter her. As expected, Shang Wanwan's mood became better after hearing that. What? It's clearly because father is the emperor and is blessed with good fortune. I can only see this dancing lotus because of fate. With this dancing lotus, she only needed to take a small portion, and she might be able to heal all the injuries on her face and body. Thinking of this, Shang Wanwan yearned for it even more, and she was about to move forward. However, just as she took half a step, she recalled what Mu Qinghe has said just now. This Mirror Lake doesn't seem to be an ordinary dangerous place. She looked at Mu Qinghe. Vice Admiral Mu, you know this Mirror Lake the best. I wonder if you have a way to get that dancing lotus? After Shang Wanwan and the rest left with the large group, Mu Hongyu and the rest were left behind. After confirming that there was no one else around, Lei Laosi finally spoke. Big brother, do you have a way to find her? His expression was nervous and worried, and there was a trace of fear in the depths of his eyes. He was really worried that something would happen to His Highness. Even with the crimson gold-red phoenix, she was only a rank 5 warrior. If she encountered great danger, after all, even he was shocked by the power that was faintly spreading from the mother tree. Qin Yi furrowed his brows slightly as he looked at the mother tree and narrowed his eyes. She should be down here, but None of us should be able to enter at the moment. As soon as he finished speaking, a look of despair appeared on their faces. Even young Master Qin can't do it? Yi Ran asked softly with reddened eyes. Qin Yi was the strongest among them. If he said that he couldn't do it, then Qin Yi sighed and looked at Chang Wanzhou. Do you know how she is now? Chang Wanzhou pressed his lips tightly together and shook his head. He was more sensitive than the average person. In addition, the Cloud Sky Copper Sword was personally made by him, so he could usually determine her position more quickly and accurately and know if she was dead or alive. However, he couldn't do more than that. Also, as Qin Yi said, there was indeed a force below that blocked everything outside, so they couldn't detect any movement at all. At this point, there was basically only a quarter of the leaves on the mother tree left. Qin Yi glanced at it and suddenly waved his sleeves to set up a barrier. The green barrier instantly enveloped Mu Hongyu and the rest. Compared to the previous barrier he set up, the aura this time was clearly much stronger. Mu Hongyu and the rest looked at each other in shock. Qin Yi's cultivation level seemed to be much stronger than what we imagined. He actually hid his true abilities previously. Laosi, stay here and look after them. I'll be back soon. Lei Laosi immediately said, Big brother, I'll go with you. Qin Yi shook his head. Nobody knew what would happen next, so it was better to be careful. These few people were all friends that Her Highness valued, so he naturally had to protect them well. Lei Laosi could only stay on the spot. Qin Yi walked forward. The withered leaves fell down and landed on his head and body. He raised his hand, picked up a leaf, and took a closer look. The originally emerald green leaf rapidly turned yellow and curled up within a few seconds. The energy and vitality contained in it seemed to have been sucked away by something. He knitted his brows and looked forward. A branch suddenly broke and fell from above. Without a doubt, that branch had also completely withered. Qin Yi glanced at it and was about to continue walking forward when he suddenly realized that a dark green glow seemed to have flashed across the spot where the branch broke. He took 2 steps closer and lowered his head to take a look. As expected, there was a faint dark green glow at the spot where the branch broke. His heart skipped a beat, and he waved his hand to cut off a branch. The branch fell at the same spot and in the same scene. Kacha! At this moment, a cracking sound was heard from the front. Qin Yi immediately looked up and saw that there was actually a crack on the extremely thick tree trunk. That crack was only the thickness of a finger and an inch long. Compared to the entire tree, it wasn't worth mentioning at all. However, very quickly, a dark green glow shone out from within. Deep underground, in the cave, the glow shone in all directions. The entire space was silent. That's roughly what happened. Chu Lue calmly explained her situation to Taizu briefly before kneeling down and kowtowing again. I hid a lot of things from Taizu previously, so please forgive me, Taizu. Taizu looked at her deeply, reached out, and gently caressed her hair as he sighed. Child, it's been hard on you. Digression, it's already a lousy February. It should be at 9 p.m. and will continue to be updated. Those who can't wait until tomorrow can also watch it. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 758. When Chu Lue talked about the past previously, she had always been very calm. Although those people and those things were like the sharpest blade, leaving the deepest and most painful scars on her. But now, she could face it calmly. His tone was calm, and his expression was indifferent, as if he was talking about someone else. However, when Taizu said that sentence, Chu Lue's nose twitched, and her eyes turned red. Those painful memories could no longer affect her in the slightest. She thought her heart was as hard as a rock. She didn't expect to be so easily defeated by Taizu's words. Although Taizu didn't have a physical body, Chu Lue couldn't feel his caress. However, she seemed to have been comforted by something in an instant. A hole opened up in the dam that had been built high in her heart, allowing the countless suppressed emotions to surge out like a flood. Chu Lue closed her eyes, and a hot tear fell silently. After a while, She raised her head and smiled at Taizu. Taizu's words were enough for Lu Yu. Taizu looked at the girl in front of him, his eyes full of pity. When he saw Chu Luiyue perform the third level of the Lingxiao palm, countless conjectures flashed through his mind. But he still didn't expect her experience to be so rough and strange. He sighed and shook his head, and a trace of anger flashed across his face. I didn't expect that there would be such a despicable person in the Shangguan family. Shangguan Wan really doesn't deserve this name. He didn't take Shangguan Wan seriously before. He just felt that this junior was not generous enough and seemed to be quite scheming, so he didn't like her very much. But he didn't expect that she would do such a thing as killing her own clan and deceiving her superiors and subordinates. In order to get everything she wanted, she was really crazy. If the Tianling dynasty is really handed over to her, I'm afraid the consequences will be unimaginable. Perhaps the 1,000-year foundation of the Tianling dynasty will be destroyed in Shangguan Wan's hands. Chu Liwei said word by word, Taizu, don't worry. Don't worry, ancestor. With Luiyue around, I definitely won't let her have her way. She will eventually pay the price for everything she has done. Taizu looked at Chu Luiyue with a relieved expression. Fortunately, in the Shangguan family besides her, there's still a good child like you, Lu Yu. Suddenly thinking of something, the great ancestor suddenly laughed and said, No wonder I felt very close to you when I saw you. We are family. Back then, after he left the Tianling God realm with Chu Luiyue, he was very curious about everything about the Tianling royal family. When Chu Luiyue went to the palace to see Shangguan Wan, he had secretly tried to look at Shangguan Wan. In the end, he was greatly disappointed. In comparison, he still liked Chu Luiyue more, so he had always been by her side. He gradually lost interest in the Tianling royal family. After going one round, it turned out that Chu Luiyue was a member of the Shangguan family. Chu Luiyue blinked. Taizu, it's good that you don't blame me. You don't know, but when you agreed to give me the Long Yuan sword, I almost wanted to confess to you. But the situation was urgent, and I didn't want to implicate you, so I didn't say it in the end. Please don't take offense. Taizu snorted. You are Shangguan Jing's junior. What can't you say? If I had known that Shangguan Wan and Jianghu had bullied you to this extent, I definitely wouldn't have let them off. His brows furrowed slightly. I don't even have enough time to feel sorry for you. How can I bear to blame you? Chu Luiyue's heart warmed. The feeling of someone standing on the same side as her, unconditionally believing and supporting her, and willing to stand up for her, it was too beautiful and precious. The former Shangguan Yu had lost everything, and only her father was left. Furthermore, he had been poisoned and fell into a coma. Until today, it was difficult for her to even see him once. And now, Chu Liwei had elders who doted on her and trusted friends. There was also Rong Xiu, who would always place her at the top of his heart. Back then, I was willing to give you the Long Yuan sword for 2 reasons. Taizu's expression became much more serious. Chu Luiyue subconsciously straightened her back. Firstly, the Long Yuan sword awakened and chose you as its new master. Although it's a Yuan instrument that I refined, it has its own intelligence. You should know that many people from the Tianling dynasty have entered the Tianling God realm over the years to ask for the Long Yuan sword, but they all failed in the end. And when you appeared, the Long Yuan sword reacted very quickly and woke up. It's not just me. It has also waited for 1,000 years for a new master that it likes. Now that it finally chose you, I naturally won't object. Chu Luiyue narrowed her eyes and finally asked the question in her heart. Even so, you spent a lot of effort to refine the Long Yuan sword. You should have wanted to leave it for the Tianling royal family. But at that time, you didn't know my identity. Why did you still give it to me so straightforwardly? Chu Luiyue believed that if Taizu wanted to stop her, he would definitely be able to. But he didn't. Instead, he gave the Long Yuan sword to her very generously. Chu Luiyue couldn't figure this out no matter how hard she tried. If it was any other treasure, it would be fine if he gave it to an outsider. But this Long Yuan sword was a symbol of Taizu's identity and also an existence that was like a sacred item of the Tianling dynasty. Its significance was extraordinary. Taizu giving it to her so straightforwardly was really out of her expectations. This is the second point that I want to talk about. Taizu paused for a moment and looked at Chu Luiyue with a complicated gaze. You probably don't know yet, but inside the Black Pyramid in your body, there seems to be a bloodline power of the Tianling royal family. Digression: a wasted February was dragged to work by Mom. Mobile users, please browse and read at around 9:30 p.m. A better reading experience comes from Ijing. Chapter 759. Once he said that, Chu Luiyue was dazed. She looked at Taizu in a daze. What do you mean by that? Taizu looked into Chu Luiyue's eyes and said firmly. It means that there's the aura of a member of the Tianling royal family hidden inside. According to my guess, it's very likely to be a soul. Chu Luiyue's pupils constricted, and she almost blurted out. How is that possible? It's really very likely. Taizu put his hands behind his back with a solemn expression. If it's just a pure force, what's the point of locking it up like this? Do you still remember the scene when you flew down the crater and entered the space under the Long Yuan sword? Countless images flashed through Chu Luiyue's mind. Of course, she remembered. Everything that happened that day was still vivid in her mind. Do you know that I specially set up that space? Those who aren't from the Tianling royal family aren't allowed to enter. Taizu's words were like a heavy hammer that smashed Chu Luiyue's head hard. Her eyes suddenly lit up. That's right. When she jumped down the crater, sword aura was everywhere. At the crucial moment, the Black Pyramid flew out and opened the door, allowing her to enter. Later, a crack appeared on the seal of the Black Pyramid. At that time, I sensed that the aura inside was extremely familiar. At that time, I thought that the soul of a descendant of the Tianling royal family was sealed inside, so I agreed to give you the Long Yuan sword and leave the Tianling god realm with you. Taizu originally wanted to take the opportunity to attack the Black Pyramid again to see what secrets were hidden inside. In the end, that crack actually repaired itself. The aura inside was isolated again. With his current cultivation level and strength, it was really difficult to break that seal. Therefore, he put this matter aside for now. It wasn't until today that he confirmed Chu Luiyue's identity that he finally told her everything. Chu Luiyue listened bit by bit, and it was as if stormy waves had surged in her heart. She had guessed countless times what was hidden in the Black Pyramid, but she had never thought of this possibility. Are you sure that it's really? Chu Luiyue's throat tightened. Taizu nodded. Absolutely. Chu Luiyue closed his eyes. Since the Taizu were so certain, then this matter was most likely true. However, this was simply too inconceivable. To tell you the truth, I accidentally obtained this item in Country Yaochen's Imperial Mausoleum. Originally, there was no seal on it, but I met a mysterious person who forcefully sealed it and gave it to me. As Chu Luiyue spoke, he stretched out his right hand. The Black Pyramid appeared in her palm. Its surface was dull and pitch black, and it looked very ordinary. The crack that had appeared earlier had indeed been repaired. Chu Luiyue frowned. If there really was a person's soul inside, then who could it be? The Tianling dynasty had been passed down for thousands of years, and there was no way to find out. What was even stranger was why it would appear in Country Yaochen's Imperial Mausoleum. Country Yaochen had existed for much shorter time than the Tianling dynasty, but even so, it was difficult to find the answer. In her impression, none of the ancestors of the Tianling dynasty had been to Country Yaochen. However, history books did not represent the real history. Other than the people involved, no one else would know what had happened. If only we could break this seal, Taizu said. Do you know who set up the seal? Chu Luiyue shook her head. I've never seen the other party. I only know that it seems to be a man. That's difficult. If we don't break the seal, we won't be able to determine who the soul inside belongs to. Taizu was a little puzzled. I wonder what the person who did this is after? Chu Luiyue stared at the Black Pyramid in her hand and suddenly said, Taizu, I don't think this seal was repaired by itself. It was repaired by the person who set up this seal. Why do you say that? Chu Luiwei was silent for a moment and shook her head. This is just my intuition. If that person did it, why did he return this thing to you back then? Couldn't he just keep it for himself? If that person was willing to put in so much effort to set up this barrier, it meant that this thing must be very important to that person. Then why did he spend so much effort to put it in Chu Luiwei's hands? Chu Luiwei fell into deep thought. Taizu's words were not without reason. If only she had seen the appearance of the great master back then. After thinking for a long time, she still had no clue. In the end, Chu Luiwei could only put away the Black Pyramid and put this matter aside. She had a premonition that the great master would definitely come looking for her again. One day, she would find out the real secret hidden here. After dealing with all these matters, Chu Luiwei sat cross-legged again. She let out a long breath and prepared to cultivate. This time, Taizu did not say anything. He just stood in front of her and silently protected her. Chu Luiwei closed her eyes and concentrated. After a period of time, the concentration of heaven and earth energy in the surroundings increased by a lot. It could be seen that in this short period of time, the two-Tian baby had swallowed a lot of energy. The water droplet in her dantian began to slowly rotate. The surrounding energy, which was originally flowing towards the two-Tian baby, gradually changed direction. Taizu did not notice at first, but when he saw the dark green light around him shake like water waves, he curiously turned around to take a look. He was shocked on the spot by what he saw. Chu Luiwei's body was already enveloped by a layer of dark green light. The surrounding energy was pouring into her body. She sat there quietly like a statue, as motionless as a mountain, and quickly absorbed the energy. And the speed was getting faster and faster. The great ancestor was horrified. Chu Luiwei, she was actually snatching the energy from the two-Tian baby? He originally thought that she was at most recuperating for a while. He did not expect that she was actually planning to cultivate, and the key point was that she did it. The two-Tian baby looked like a small bead, but in fact, it was very domineering. The entire mystic forest was under its control. Everything that had happened before was actually its doing. It could quickly devour all the energy in the surrounding space. In the end, it caused the space to completely collapse. Chu Luiwei was actually able to snatch energy from it for her own cultivation, even he might not be able to do it. Moreover, Chu Luiwei was only a stage 5 warrior now. Taizu was dumbfounded. Chu Luiwei knew nothing about this. In her opinion, she was just absorbing the energy of heaven and earth around her to cultivate. Well, the speed of the water droplets' rotation seemed to be a little faster than before. 5 lines swayed gently on the water droplet. The crystal suddenly swayed and floated towards Chu Luiwei. Taizu sucked in a breath of cold air. Chu Luiwei was trying to snatch food from the tiger's mouth. Digression, another mistake after writing, I almost lost the manuscript. After looking for it for a long time, I'm tired, let's go eat. There's nothing to eat today. Dozens of demons have been eaten. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience from love. Chapter 760. Taizu wanted to stop the crystal, but the pressure around him was too heavy. Even he could not bear it. Fortunately, the crystal stopped in midair. It floated quietly in midair. The green light was like water ripples, rippling in all directions. It was dazzling. The surrounding stone walls were illuminated with a faint green color. The heaven-wrecking holy seed inside was clearly visible. Taizu held his breath. This was the closest he had ever been to the two-Tian baby. At a glance, it was no different from an ordinary medicinal herb seed. Who would have thought that such a small thing would have the power to destroy the world? Fortunately, with the layer of crystal as a barrier, its aura and pressure were basically blocked. If it really appeared and was completely exposed, who knew what kind of terrifying situation it would be? Taizu turned around and glanced at Chu Luiwei. Her eyes were closed as she cultivated in peace, allowing the surrounding energy of heaven and earth to quickly enter her body. Taizu's expression was solemn. To be able to meet the two-Tian baby was undoubtedly a great opportunity. However, This kind of opportunity was not something that everyone could afford to accept. The slightest bit of carelessness could cost one's life. I wonder if the girl can survive this time. While Taizu was filled with worry, Chu Liuyue's aura had already quietly increased. All the energy flowed through her limbs and bones into her dantian, and finally disappeared into the water droplet. After being tempered, the water droplet spat out the pure force and poured it into Chu Liuyue's body. Under the imperceptible influence, the power contained in Chu Liuyue's muscles, bones, blood, and flesh were all improved. Time passed bit by bit. Chu Liyue was completely immersed in her cultivation, so she did not notice the passage of time. However, for Taizu, this waiting time was especially unbearable. Gradually, he realized that the situation was not what he had expected. This was because Chu Liyue had already devoured too much energy. According to her current realm, she should have reached her limit long ago. However, Chu Liyue's expression did not change. His expression was calm, and there was not the slightest difference. Streaks of dark green light, containing abundant power, all entered her body. This isn't right. The Taizu widened his eyes in disbelief. Chu Liyue's body? Why does it seem like a bottomless pit? He knew that Chu Liyue had a few trump cards and was much stronger than ordinary cultivators. But wasn't this too exaggerated? For some reason, Taizu suddenly recalled that when Chu Liyue was polishing the Cloud Sky Copper Sword, he had forced the Tianlei to stay on the sword for a long time. In the end, he had gone up and pulled it down himself. It was a different approach to achieve the same result as the current situation. None of these were things that normal people could do. The Taizu looked at Chu Liyue with a headache. He was both happy and worried. He was happy that Chu Liyue's cultivation talent and potential seemed to be better than he had expected. After all, she was a descendant of his bloodline. The Taizu really didn't know how to dote on her now. He was worried that Chu Liyue had devoured so much energy all of a sudden, and it was even taken from the two Tian baby. Would she really be fine? If that thing exploded, even his old bones wouldn't be able to help much. He turned his gaze slightly and looked at the red-tailed phoenix that was guarding Chu Liyue. It had been standing there from the beginning. At some point in time, its body was enveloped in a layer of dark green light. It was Chu Liyue's contracted magical beast. Naturally, it would be affected when Chu Liyue's strength increased. However, compared to his worries, the red-tailed phoenix retracted its wings and closed its eyes. It seemed to be much more at ease. It was as if it wasn't worried that anything would happen to Chu Liyue. Buzz. Right at this moment, a loud boom suddenly came from the crystal. The Taizu immediately turned around and was shocked to see that the last seal on it had finally dissipated. The crystal began to vibrate slightly. In an instant, the surrounding light began to surge back towards the crystal. The light that had filled the entire space retreated at a speed visible to the naked eye like a receding tide. Soon, the surroundings dimmed and finally fell into complete darkness. The Taizu's heart tightened as he took a step closer to Chu Liyue. The aura around his body instantly accumulated. At this moment, the air seemed to have completely frozen. Just as the Taizu was about to think of a way to bring Chu Liyue away from this place, a speck of starlight suddenly appeared in the darkness. Gradually, the speck of starlight began to expand. The light lit up, and it was indeed the same crystal. However, at this moment, there was only a faint green glow left on the crystal. For some reason, the Taizu felt that this light was different from the one he had seen before. A halo of light spread out from the crystal. Wherever it passed, space collapsed. A large patch of darkness appeared. The halo of light was transparent and revealed an extremely light layer of green. The Taizu knew that something was wrong. Just as he was about to exert his strength, he suddenly realized that his strength was completely suppressed and could not be used at all. Soon, the halo of light spread to this side and gently passed through the translucent soul of the Taizu. Then, it arrived in front of Chu Liyue and enveloped her. To the Taizu's relief, this did not seem to have any effect on Chu Liyue. When the halo of light spread to the edge of the surrounding stone walls, it finally stopped. If someone were to look down from above, this place would look like a huge green amber. The Taizu looked up and saw an endless darkness. He frowned slightly. The two Tian baby should have swallowed all the energy from the outside world. Next, he was afraid that, buzz. After a short moment of silence, the crystal trembled even more violently. It seemed that the two Tian baby wanted to completely break free from it. The Taizu stared at it closely, his heart in his throat. This two Tian baby was not as big as the one he had seen before, and its power should not be as terrifying. However, if it really came out, it would be difficult to control it. Within the halo of light, all the energy from the outside world had already been divided up by Chu Luiyue and the two Tian baby. A crazy suction force spread out from the crystal. It seemed that it wanted to take back the energy in Chu Luiyue's body. The black shield in front of Chu Luiyue began to shake because of the cracks in the ground. At this moment, Chu Luiyue suddenly opened her eyes. Two red flames were burning in her eyes. She stared at the two Tian baby and slowly raised her hand. A transparent water droplet suddenly appeared in front of her. She gently moved her hand forward. Bang! The water droplet splashed. In an instant, it condensed into a water curtain in front of her. That terrifying suction force was immediately blocked outside. Chu Luiyue's hand moved slightly and made a grabbing motion in the air. The crystal was actually coming toward her. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 761. However, the crystal seemed to have sensed the danger and released an extremely strong aura. In the end, it stopped 10 steps away from the water curtain. But this time, it didn't try to snatch Chu Luiyue's power. Chu Luiyue tried again and realized that she couldn't make it move forward, so she gave up. She stared at the crystal for a while and chuckled. I hate it when people snatch my things. As if it was afraid, the crystal suddenly took a step back. Taizu? What's going on? It's different from what I expected again. The two Tian baby is hidden in the crystal, but it's actually afraid of Chu Luiyue. Even though Taizu had seen how domineering Chu Luiyue was when she dealt with Tianlei, he still felt that the impact was too great and hard to digest. To be honest, although this thing was the one who pulled Chu Luiyue down, it was actually Chu Luiyue who was snatching its energy now. After all, the energy that Chu Luiyue swallowed was collected by this two Tian baby. However, Chu Luiyue was so self-righteous as if the two Tian baby was really taking advantage of her. Taizu felt a headache coming on again. He had stayed in the Tianling god realm for thousands of years, but he didn't know when the two Tian baby had become so cowardly. Has the world really changed? Taizu looked at the crystal with a complicated expression and found it hard to accept. He could even clearly hear the sound of something collapsing in his heart. Ever since he got together with Chu Luiyue, this kind of thing happened from time to time. Many things in the world have become inconceivable. Most importantly, she herself seems to be used to it and doesn't think she's that cruel. There probably aren't many people in the entire continent who would dare to threaten the two Tian baby with this kind of tone. Taizu looked at the scene in front of him and fell into deep thought. Of course, the two Tian baby wouldn't be afraid of a stage 5 warrior. The key should be that water curtain. This water curtain wasn't big and was only about the height of a person. It just happened to appear in front of Chu Luiyue and separated her from the two Tian baby. The two Tian baby seemed to be very afraid of this water curtain and refused to get close to it. It didn't even hesitate to give up the energy that Chu Luiyue had swallowed. After a short silence, the crystal began to vibrate again. But this time, compared to before, he was much more restrained. The surrounding space gradually became viscous. Chu Luiyue's eyes narrowed. However, the great ancestor seemed to have suddenly thought of something and gasped in shock. Taizu, what's wrong? Asked Chu Luiyue in confusion. Taizu, to the crystal, to the crystal, to the crystal, to the crystal, 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 the crystal, the crystal, 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 crystal. It controls the space. Have you noticed that this place seems to be different? Chu Luiyue nodded. The speed of the energy flow seems to have slowed down. Taizu paused and said with difficulty, "This is because the flow of time here has slowed down." Chu Luiyue's heart skipped a beat. She knew what this meant. Legend had it that those who had broken through to stage 9 could create their own divine territory. And in that divine territory, everything could be controlled at will, including the flow of time. The stronger one was, the more amazing their control in this aspect. There were many benefits to slowing down the flow of time. For example, cultivators could enter it to cultivate, and they could also cultivate some natural treasures. If 1 day in the outside world was equivalent to 10 days in the divine territory, then it was equivalent to increasing one's cultivation speed by 10 times. Medicinal herbs that took 100 years to grow could be harvested in 10 years. In short, the benefits were countless. But wasn't that something that only the legendary top powerhouses could do? Even someone as strong as Taizu only left behind an incomplete Tianling divine territory back then, and he couldn't do this. And this 2 Tian baby. Rumor has it that the 2 Tian baby can do this. Taizu frowned and nodded. Only then did Chu Liwei realize that the 2 Tian baby seemed to be stronger than she had imagined. It probably wants to trap you here. The long time would probably be very difficult to endure. If Chu Liwei couldn't endure it, it would give it a chance. At that time, this is good. Chu Liue's eyes lit up as she said happily. What? Taizu was confused. You're not worried that it will trap you here forever? It was dark here and she was alone. Even if she wasn't afraid, wouldn't she feel lonely after a long time? One had to know that being in such an environment for a long time could definitely drive people crazy. Even with him around, it wouldn't be easy to endure. Who knew when they would be able to get out? Chu Liwei blinked and smiled. What's there to worry about? I think we can take advantage of this opportunity to cultivate. Can you tell how much slower the flow of time here is compared to the outside world? Taizu hesitated for a moment and said, probably. A day in the outside world is equivalent to a month here. But here, there is no sun or moon, so it should be difficult to know how much time has passed. Chu Liwei smiled and took out an hourglass from her universe ring. That's not a problem. This hourglass counts for an entire day, and it will automatically turn over when it's full. I'm afraid I'll have to trouble you to help me pay more attention in the future. She entered a cultivation state and had no concept of time. With Taizu's help, it would be much more convenient. Taizu clicked his tongue. You have a lot of things with you. You even have this. Chu Liwei coughed. In fact, she didn't prepare this for herself. When Rong Xiu gave her the universe ring, she had a lot of things with her. She had checked it when she was bored. In addition to money and all kinds of treasures, there were many miscellaneous things in it. Among them was this hourglass. She didn't expect it to come in handy at this time. Since you've already made up your mind, I won't say anything more. As you said, this is indeed a rare opportunity. As long as you can get out of here in the end, it won't be a problem. Chu Liwei nodded. Don't worry, I know what to do. Compared to ordinary people and even most cultivation geniuses, her cultivation speed was already extremely fast. But it was far from enough. The opponents she had to face were the most powerful people in the Tianling dynasty, who could almost cover the sky with one hand. Even if she had a lot of trump cards, she was still inferior to them. Now that she could take advantage of this opportunity to improve her cultivation speed, she was naturally very happy. As for Taizu's worry about whether she could get through it, he had experienced so much pain and torment in the past. What did this mean to him now? Chu Liwei closed her eyes and put her hands on her knees, palms facing up. The water curtain swayed gently. Crack! On the crystal, a fragment suddenly fell down. Digression. At 6:00. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 762. The fragment was very thin, only the size of a fingernail. It looked very inconspicuous. However, when Taizu saw this scene, a trace of shock flashed across his face. Without the suppression of the seal, the crystal began to shatter. Just as he was extremely nervous, he saw the fragment flying towards Chu Liwei. The fragment was pale green, crystal clear, and contained an extremely majestic power. Wherever it passed, the viscous space was almost cut apart. Just like that, it slowly and steadily flew to the front of the water curtain. Then an amazing scene happened. The fragment did not directly pass through the water curtain. Instead, it gradually melted silently. Soon, a faint green color appeared on the transparent water curtain. Then, a faint green water droplet gently condensed and flew towards Chu Luiyue. Chu Luiyue swallowed the water droplet naturally, and then converted the energy contained in it into her own force. The aura on her body strengthened again. The whole process was smooth and there was no pause at all. Taizu opened his mouth, but suddenly felt that he was at a loss for words. Wasn't Chu Luiyue equivalent to swallowing the power accumulated by the two Tian baby in a disguised form? Did he just take the energy from the crystal for himself just like that? Looking at Chu Luiyue's calm face, and even her complexion was a little rosy, Taizu suddenly felt that his previous worries were unnecessary. The heaven-wrecking holy seed is formidable, but when it meets Chu Luiyue, who doesn't play by the rules, it was still unknown who would be able to outplay the other. Taizu thought for a moment, and simply retreated a few steps from the position in front of Chu Luiyue to the right front of her, making it easier for her to snatch the power of the two Tian baby more smoothly. Looking at the red-tailed phoenix, who was very calm from the beginning to the end, Taizu faintly thought that it should have known that Chu Luiyue would do such a thing. As expected, he took after his master. His arrogant and disdainful temperament was exactly the same. After putting down the initial worry in his heart, Taizu calmed down a lot and began to stand by the side. Watch the show. Chu Luiyue was slowly killing time in the god's domain created by the two Tian baby. She was currently unable to leave, nor was she able to contact anyone from the outside world. She could only focus on her cultivation. On the other hand, Qin Yi and the rest didn't know about her current situation, so they were naturally very worried. Qin Yi felt a little uneasy as he stared at the faint, dark green glow emitting from the broken branches. The inexplicable crack on the tree trunk made him tense up. The seal should have been completely destroyed. He remembered clearly that Chu Luiyue had been swallowed by the same color of light below. From the looks of it, it was very likely that they had already surged up from underground. If it were to erupt, it would be extremely dangerous. This made him even more worried about Chu Luiyue's current condition. Qin Yi held his breath and focused as he walked forward step by step and stood still in front of the tree trunk. This mother tree was very thick and strong. Standing in front of this tree trunk, he seemed very small. The leaves on the tree trunk had all fallen off cleanly. Standing close to the tree trunk, he could see countless tiny cracks on it. Every crack was filled with that strange light. It seemed like it would burst out the next moment. Qin Yi's muscles tensed up as he stretched his hand forward. However, before he could touch the tree trunk, the light suddenly dimmed. In just a split second, all the light in the tiny cracks disappeared. Soundless. This one Yeshan also finally stopped curling up and withered. The surroundings were so quiet that one could hear a pin drop. Qin Yi paused for a moment. A silver light flashed in his hand, and a sword appeared. He stared straight ahead as he held the sword with both hands and slowly but firmly slashed it down. Crack! The sword glinted coldly. A layer of bark was sliced off. A deep sword mark was left on the tree trunk. Qin Yi focused his gaze and realized that all the energy in the tree trunk had been swallowed, and it had become much more brittle because of its withered state. However, most of it couldn't be seen. That frightening aura seemed to have dissipated as well. After waiting for a while, there was silence, and nothing happened. A light breeze blew over, and Qin Yi felt a chill on his back. He closed his eyes, kept his sword, and slowly retreated. Mu Hongyu and the rest watched nervously from behind. They didn't even dare to blink, afraid that they would miss something. Everyone was shocked when they saw Qin Yi actually turn around after sending out the sword. Lei Laosi couldn't hold it in and took 2 steps forward first. He hurriedly asked, "Big brother, how is it?" Qin Yi shook his head. Lei Laosi's face turned pale. The other people's expressions also froze. Qin Yi sighed and explained, "I can't be sure. What we can be sure of is that she is currently trapped by a strange force and is unable to come out." Originally, that force should have rushed out, but for some reason, it retreated instead. Lei Laosi was dazed. Big brother, you mean, you should still remember the scene when we first came here, right? Qin Yi glanced at him and squinted his eyes slightly. Back then, the same thing happened to this mother tree. A force wanted to rush out, but that 9-colored heavenly pheasant appeared and repaired the seal, so that incident was left unsettled. Lei Laosi's eyes flickered, and he nodded. In actual fact, the situation back then wasn't completely like that. How could the 9-colored heavenly pheasant do this alone? However, there was no need to tell these children this. So, is it still because of that 9-colored heavenly pheasant this time? No, it's already broken through to become a red-tailed phoenix. Perhaps it became even stronger? Qin Yi nodded. It's not impossible. When Mu Hongyu and the rest heard this, they heaved a sigh of relief. This means that Lu Yu still has a high chance of coming out? The red-tailed phoenix is a legendary fiend. It should be able to help her, right? Mu Hongyu and Yi Ranran were both optimistic. Only Chang Wanzhou looked deeply at Qin Yi, pressed his lips tightly together, and didn't say anything. I've seen that scene before. The red-tailed phoenix definitely isn't a match for that force. However, Qin Yi clearly didn't want Mu Hongyu and Yi Ranran to know about this. Then what should we do now? Can we only wait here for Lu Yu? Asked Yi Ranran with a frown. Qin Yi turned around and looked at that mother tree. Let's hope so. At the border where the Mystic Forest and Mirror Lake connected, the appearance of the dancing lotus made Shangguan Wan and the rest very excited. She immediately suggested for Mu Qinghe to retrieve the dancing lotus. Once she said that, the originally noisy surroundings instantly quietened down. Everyone looked at Mu Qinghe with different expressions. Curious, envious, worried. Everyone knew that Mirror Lake was dangerous. The first to go would definitely be the first to bear the brunt. Mu Qinghe kept quiet for a while and nodded. Yes. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 763. Then, Mu Qinghe turned around and walked in the direction of the dancing lotus. The boundary between the Mystic Forest and the Mirror Lake was very clear. In the middle was something like a dam. On one side was the thick ground of the Mystic Forest that was filled with fallen leaves, and on the other side was the Mirror Lake that was glistening with water. Surprisingly, the isolated dam was only an inch wide, but none of the leaves from the Mystic Forest flew to the lake on the other side. The waves on the lake also did not cross the dam and flow to the other side. There seemed to be an invisible barrier in the middle that separated the two sides clearly. Mu Qinghe soon arrived at the narrow dam. He took a deep breath, circulated the force in his body, and swung his right hand. A long sword flew out. It floated in front of him. Mu Qinghe jumped and stood on the flying sword. Just as he was about to ride the sword forward, he inadvertently glanced at the lake and found that there seemed to be something sparkling on the surface of the lake. He squinted his eyes and looked over. Then he was stunned on the spot, because the sparkling thing was actually a piece of floating ice. The afterglow of the setting sun shone on it, and the clear, glass-like floating ice reflected the bright and dazzling light. The Mirror Lake was vast and boundless. Its borders were close to the Mystic Forest and the Red Moon Desert. It was like spring and summer all year round, and the water rippled. Why would such a piece of floating ice suddenly appear? Vice Admiral Mu, is there a problem? Shangguan Wan saw that Mu Qinghe was not moving and could not help but urge him. Mu Qinghe did not respond immediately. Instead, he looked around. Sure enough, he saw another piece of floating ice not far away. This piece of floating ice was quietly floating on the surface of the lake. It was inconspicuous. If not for the fact that Mu Qinghe happened to be standing in the sky in the afterglow of the setting sun, he would definitely not have noticed it. For example, Shangguan Wan and the others did not see this strange situation. Mu Qinghe felt a little uneasy. This Mirror Lake is strange. Shangguan Wan frowned. What strange? Mu Qinghe raised her hand and pointed. Floating ice has never appeared in Mirror Lake before. Shengguan looked at Mu Qinghe's serious expression and thought that something big had happened. Who would have thought that it was only because of 1 or 2 pieces of floating ice? She chuckled and said calmly, "That's right. It's just 2 pieces of floating ice. It shouldn't be a big deal, right? If Vice Admiral Mu is really worried, why don't we get the dancing lotus back as soon as possible and leave immediately?" Mu Qinghe's frown deepened. "Third Princess, you may not know this, but this Mirror Lake has always been like this for a long time. There has never been such a situation before. I'm afraid that something strange has happened. For safety's sake, it's better for everyone to evacuate immediately." Shengguan was stunned. Evacuate immediately? What about the dancing lotus? It wasn't easy for them to meet, so how could they leave just like that? What should he say when he returned to the West Hill? Also, her Yuan Meridian, Vice Admiral Mu, this consort thinks that you're worrying too much. I know that you've been in Dahuang Swamp for many years and know this place very well. But how many years has Mirror Lake existed? Do you dare to say that it has been like this since the day it existed? It is also possible that it has already appeared in a similar situation when you were unaware of it. What do you think? Mu Qinghe couldn't refute her words. Shengguan had made up her mind to take the dancing lotus back. If Vice Admiral Mu is really worried, why don't we invite Elder Qiushi along? Elder Qiushi didn't show any fear or worry when he heard this. Instead, he was excited. I'll naturally obey Third Princess's orders. Retrieving the dancing lotus would undoubtedly be a great achievement. Furthermore, it was a rare natural treasure, and its entire body was extremely precious. Even just touching it might be very beneficial. As for danger, there was nothing here except for the lake water. It wasn't as complicated as the Mystic Forest. Even if they encountered any danger, they could just run back. How dangerous could it be? Shengguan nodded. Then I'll have to trouble Elder Qiushi and Vice Admiral Mu. Elder Qiushi responded and quickly rushed to Mu Qinghe's side. Mu Qinghe glanced at him. Since he wanted to die, there was nothing to persuade him. Vice Admiral Mu, please. Elder Qiushi raised his hand. Mu Qinghe didn't say anything else. She rode on her sword and continued forward. Elder Qiushi followed closely behind. His eyes were already glued to the dancing lotus in the center of the lake in the distance. Mu Qinghe looked down from time to time, and her expression gradually turned cold. Because she realized that there were more than 2 pieces of floating ice on the lake. The closer they went to the center, the more floating ice there were. And they gradually gathered together to form a large ice surface. And that translucent dancing lotus was already surrounded by a layer of ice. Mu Qinghe stopped. Elder Qiushi hurriedly stopped as well. Vice Admiral Mu, why aren't you continuing forward? The dancing lotus is right in front of you. You can retrieve it soon. Mu Qinghe's face seemed to be covered with a layer of frost. There was definitely something wrong with this Mirror Lake. He had been to Mirror Lake many times, and whenever he got close, he would encounter all kinds of dangerous situations. But this time, the Mirror Lake was too calm. Not only did this not make him feel at ease, but it also made him feel even more uneasy. There must be something wrong when things are abnormal. Elder Qiushi, since you want the dancing lotus so much, why don't you go first? Elder Qiushi was a little scared. His gaze wandered back and forth between Mu Qinghe and the dancing lotus. He was in a dilemma. He really wanted to retrieve the dancing lotus, but he was also afraid that something would happen. Mu Qinghe's reaction really didn't make one feel at ease. Seeing that the two of them had stopped, Shengguan couldn't help but urge them. Elder Qiushi made up his mind. There were so many people here anyway. What was there to worry about? If he was the one who retrieved the dancing lotus, his status would definitely rise when he returned to West Hill. At the thought of this, the balance in his heart finally leaned towards the side of greed. He walked past Mu Qinghe and approached. However, he wasn't stupid. He didn't use his hands to retrieve it. Such a treasure was definitely not that easy to obtain. He waved his sleeve and threw out a rope as thick as a thumb, wrapping it around the branch of the dancing lotus. After waiting for a moment, there was nothing unusual. Elder Qiushi felt a little more confident. He pulled his wrist back, trying to pull the dancing lotus out. However, just as he moved, the rope slid down the branch. Elder Qiushi missed his target. He looked up in shock and realized that the branch was extremely smooth. There was a faint luster on it, and it was indeed very difficult to bind it with a rope. He thought for a moment and set up a barrier around himself. At the same time, he put away the rope and used his sword. He approached step by step and finally raised his sword to slash. However, just as the sword came into contact with the branch, it actually slipped. Before Elder Qiushi could react, his body was pulled down by an invisible force. Plop! It penetrated the ice layer and fell into the lake. Digression, 6:30 p.m. February has been abolished. Sob 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 sob. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 764. A hole instantly appeared on the smooth and flat ice surface. A few drops of lake water splashed out, but Elder Qiushi's figure had already completely sunk into the lake and disappeared. In fact, he didn't even have the time to cry out in alarm. Mu Qinghe, who was standing closest to him, had a change in expression, and his pupils constricted. The entire thing happened too suddenly. Before he could react, everything had already ended. He didn't even have the chance to take action. When Shangguan Wan and the rest, who were standing far away, saw this scene, they were all stunned on the spot. Especially Shangguan Wan. She was originally waiting happily and expectantly for Elder Qiushi to retrieve the dancing lotus. She was about to succeed, but she didn't even see what exactly happened. Just now. Wasn't everything fine? In just the blink of an eye, Elder Qiushi suddenly fell into the water. Shangguan Wan widened her eyes in shock. After Elder Qiushi fell into the water, he didn't make a single sound. Especially now, when the water surface seemed to have regained its calmness. Under normal circumstances, anyone who fell into the water would struggle and ask for help. Elder Qiushi didn't. There's only one possibility: he's already dead. In that short moment, Shangguan Wan clutched her chest, and her footsteps faltered as she instinctively grabbed Jiang Yuqing's arm. Yuqing, what happened just now? Jiang Yuqing knitted his brows tightly and spoke in a low voice. He seemed to have been dragged down by something, but I didn't see it clearly either. Shangguan Wan's throat was dry, and she felt both fearful and relieved. Luckily, I didn't go over personally just now. If not, I would be the one dead. But Elder Qiushi is a stage 7 warrior. How can it be? To be able to take his life in such a short period of time, it's enough to show how scary it is. If it were someone else, they might die even faster than me. Jiang Yuqing's face was also very dark. Elder Duanmu Chun is already gone. Now, even Elder Qiushi is. This trip was much more dangerous than he had expected. Shangguan Wan lowered her eyes and her eyes flashed. She was the one who killed Elder Duanmu Chun, but Jiang Yuqing didn't seem to know. He probably thought that she would only attack these young geniuses, right? Little did they know that she had long found Elder Duanmu Chun an eyesore. This was because Duanmu Chun was not her confidant, and he had always been on good terms with Shangguan Yu. Elder Duanmu Chun had an amiable temperament. Although he was an elder of the royal family, he had never participated in the affairs of the royal family. Even though Shangguan Yu admired him back then, he did not become her man. He had always kept to himself. He was still the same when he came to Shangguan Wan. Most people wouldn't care, but Shangguan Wan couldn't stand it. Moreover, he always used Shangguan Yu's standards when she was in power to measure everything she did. This violated Shangguan Wan's taboo. Therefore, she might as well take this opportunity to get rid of Elder Duanmu Chun. However, this was not important. Anyway, many people had died in her hands. One more didn't make a difference. Those who couldn't be used by her were dead. It was a pity that Elder Qiushi died. After the initial shock, she finally regained her senses. She looked at Mu Qinghe with suppressed anger. Vice Admiral Mu, what's going on? You were close to Elder Qiushi. Why didn't you help? She even suspected that Mu Qinghe did it on purpose. He had always disliked Elder Qiushi. Mu Qinghe said coldly. The last general also wanted to help, but he didn't have the strength. Even Elder Qiushi didn't have the strength to retaliate. Could it be that Your Highness, the third princess, thought that this general was still some distance away from Elder Qiushi just now? Could it be that this general could reach him first if he made a move later? Sheng Wanwan choked. Mu Qinghe's words made sense. Everyone clearly saw the situation just now. Mu Qinghe probably didn't have time to help. The last general already said that there's something wrong with Mirror Lake. Now you finally believe it, right? Mu Qinghe's words made Sheng Wanwan's face turn red and white. Wasn't saying this in front of so many people the same as publicly criticizing her? Mu Qinghe took one last look at the spot where Elder Qiushi disappeared. There seemed to be a faint green light flashing by. He narrowed his eyes and was about to take a closer look when a layer of ice formed on the surface again. That ice hole was quickly repaired and looked exactly the same as before. It was impossible to tell that it had once shattered and that a person had fallen in. More and more layers of ice began to form on the surface of the lake in the distance. Mu Qinghe said in a low voice. Third princess, eldest young master, it's better for us to leave Mirror Lake as soon as possible. In the quiet and sticky space, Chu Luiyue sat cross-legged and was cultivating peacefully. Not far away on the opposite side, the crystal quietly floated. Suddenly, the layer of faint green light on the outside fluctuated. Then, a faint green light passed through the light and headed toward the crystal. Chu Luiyue seemed to have sensed something and opened her eyes. Seeing the light, she raised her eyebrows slightly and muttered softly. It has a lot of tricks up its sleeve. The energy in the mystic forest should have been completely devoured by it. She didn't expect it to be able to get such an abundant energy. Chu Luiyue's red lips curved. With a slight thought, the water curtain shook gently. The ball of light was about to fly to the crystal and was about to merge with it. However, when the water curtain moved, the ball of light also seemed to be pulled by something and flew over in a wobbly manner. Like the previous fragment, the light silently merged with the water curtain and finally turned into a water droplet and arrived in front of Chu Luiyue. Chu Luiyue's eyes curved. Since you're so polite, I'll kindly accept it. After saying that, she swallowed the energy of the water droplet. Taizu, who was standing at the side, raised his eyebrows fiercely and glanced at the crystal. It was trembling slightly. It wasn't the kind that wanted to break out forcefully. It was because of anger. Digression, I didn't add any new chapters today. Because I ate the updated chapters. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 765. For the first time, Taizu felt that the two-Tian baby was a little pitiful. It had finally broken the seal, and just as it was about to break out, Chu Luiyue appeared out of nowhere. Not only did she snatch the energy it had gathered, she even snatched it several times. It didn't know how she had gotten this energy, or if Chu Luiyue had forcibly snatched it away. Who wouldn't be angry when the duck in their mouth flew away? The key point was that Taizu was still afraid of Chu Luiyue. If it wasn't for the water curtain, Taizu believed that Chu Luiyue would definitely not be a match for the two-Tian baby. But how could there be so many ifs in the world? Speaking of which, it was Taizu who had forcibly pulled Chu Luiyue down. It was just asking for trouble. Taizu put his hands in his sleeves and laughed. According to the current development of the situation, the chances of the two-Tian baby coming out were even slimmer. It was hard to say who would be able to endure who. Chu Luiyue's aura was still increasing. She carefully and patiently refined all of this energy, transforming it into her own force. Her flesh, blood, tendons, and bones became more and more resilient under the cleansing of this pure energy. Time slowly passed. At a certain moment, Chu Luiyue's aura skyrocketed. A slight sound came from within her body. Chu Luiyue's strength had finally advanced to the middle stage of stage 5. Taizu noticed this movement and subconsciously glanced at the hourglass next to him, a trace of shock flashing through his eyes. Chu Luiyue's breakthrough speed was too fast. Although he had already mentally prepared himself, it was still hard to believe that Chu Luiwei had smoothly and quickly crossed the threshold of the middle stage. She had the Daijing Yuan Meridian. Although it couldn't be compared to the Tianjing Yuan Meridian, her cultivation speed was obviously faster than the average Daijing Yuan Meridian cultivator. Taizu put his hands behind his back and looked at Chu Luiwei with a solemn gaze. When she was Shangguanyu, her cultivation had reached the peak of a rank 8 warrior and she was only one step away from becoming a rank 9 warrior. With such an experience, Chu Luiwei would undoubtedly take fewer detours when she cultivated in this life. Plus, she had many heaven-defying opportunities. Taizu sighed softly, his eyes flashing with admiration. Although it was a pity that Chu Luiwei didn't have the Tianjing Yuan Meridian, she had been able to come so far. He wondered what realm she would be able to reach by the time she got out of here. The outside world had no way of knowing what was happening underground. At this moment, Shangguanyu Yang faced a dilemma. On one hand, Yu of the lotus flower. On the other hand, he hadn't obtained the dancing lotus yet. It would be a pity to leave just like that. After Mu Qing has said that, everyone fell silent and looked at Shangguanyu. Even the sect disciples who had been admiring the beautiful scenery of Mirror Lake and were full of yearning were now nervous. In the beginning, no one took Mu Qing's warning to heart. But when something happened to Elder Qiushi, they immediately understood that this place was completely different from what they had expected. Mu Qing's words weren't alarmist words. She might even have been tactful. They came to the great desolate swamp mostly for the treasures here. But the premise was that they had to be alive. The dancing lotus was indeed a rare treasure, but if they had to pay with their lives for it, no one would continue to do it. Shangguanyu also knew this. At this time, it wasn't appropriate for her to send anyone. That would be sending them to their deaths. But she really wanted to get the dancing lotus. Jianghu saw that she seemed to be very conflicted and could roughly guess her thoughts. Everyone saw the scene just now. This Mirror Lake is indeed strange. If we stay any longer, I'm afraid the casualties will be even more serious. It's better to evacuate first. Anyway, the dancing lotus is here, and it will bloom for a few years. Let's go back to Xiling first and think of a way to get it later. Shangguanyu was still a little hesitant. But what if something happens during this time? You've seen how difficult it is to deal with the dancing lotus. Even Elder Qiushi couldn't escape. Who can easily take it away? Shangguanyu thought about it and felt that his words made sense. In the entire Tianling dynasty, there weren't many people who were stronger than Elder Qiushi. As long as the news of the dancing lotus's appearance wasn't leaked, there shouldn't be too much of a problem. Jianghu looked at her, and his voice became gentler. Also, you need to go back and recuperate as soon as possible. It won't delay anything if you come back after you've recovered. These words finally convinced Shangguanyu. Her body and face both needed to be recuperated. With the Mirror Lake in this state, she definitely wouldn't have the chance to make a move on anyone. It was better to go back to Xiling first. Perhaps she could find a suitable person and opportunity. She thought for a moment and finally nodded. But after Shangguanyu agreed, everyone heaved a sigh of relief. The two royal elders who came with them had both died. The danger of the Dahuang swamp was obvious. If they were a little unlucky, they might be the ones who died. Under Mu Qing's command, everyone began to evacuate. However, compared to the excitement they had when they came, everyone now looked dejected and disappointed. They had all come with all kinds of expectations, but who knew that they would end up with nothing and almost lose their lives? Because there were more injured people, Zhu Hong and the others from Dragon Teeth Mountain walked at the back. However, compared to the other sects, they were luckier.